now. Hey everybody, welcome to Transport Treehouse, our little arboreal fortress where conversations about mobility and energy are casual and candid. My name is Russell Frost, but I'm merely the pilot of this vessel. Allow me to introduce you to my captain, and maybe you're a captain as well, Chelsea Sexton.
Oh, Captain, my Captain. Yeah, I thought you were going to change it up every time, but yes, the arboreal forest thing is it's very
Oh, don't hurt my feelings. I try to be poetic, and you're going to crush it.
No,
right there.
It's totally poetic. It's lovely. No, this is just our excuse.
I just wanted to say arboreal.
I was going to say that's a cool word.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you, Matthew. I just so maybe I need to change the.
I got nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. Let's
you
get
know
to
what?
it.
I'll feel bad about this later on, and then I'll change it. So that's how that'll work. Hey. So hey, Chelsea. And with us this week, our special guest, Matthew Teske. Matthew is the mind, the creative impetus, and everything else behind Chargeway and several other things. So, Matt, hi.
Jolt.
Hello.
Jolt.
Oh, yeah.
Do we still talk about Jolt?
Some people might. I don't know. I mean, some people probably still think it's the cola, so you never know.
See?
Only people of a certain age. Thank you very much.
That's probably fair. Yeah. It's like, wow, so you were born a long time ago. Okay.
Yes, I was.
Thanks for that.
Well, you being the collective you, not just you.
Hey, man, it's been a great episode. We're looking forward to having you on again. Thank you very
Exactly. Oh, that's fun. All right, cool. See you guys.
That's it. Go ahead. Play the boomer card on me. You're done.
Well, again, it's the treehouse, so I felt like I should have brought like some high C and like a slingshot. Like if we're really going to date ourselves to going back to a treehouse experience, you know.
I have complete Calvin and Hobbes tiger. It is that kind of treehouse.
That is awesome. I have toys throughout my desk. I guess the best thing I got is this little like Austrian like dude who, when I'm stressed, I squeeze him. I don't know. That's, you know.
When you're
mine's the puke character. I'm not sure what that says. But they were giving them out at CES, and that seemed a little on brand.
Okay. They're like, how are you feeling right now? I'll take that one.
Yeah. That was the only one they were offering, but it was worth it.
Wow.
Nice.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And this is gonna be fun to catch up and chat and, see what you guys have been chatting about regarding obviously all the infrastructure stuff, and also kind of chat about what I'm doing with Chargeway, and we can throw Jolt in there if we feel necessary, I guess.
Yeah, it's just funny. That's how we kind of got started conspiring together. So. Oh yeah. And I mean, how many people can say they single-handedly launched an internal investigation inside a major automaker?
That's true. That is very true. I'm still waiting for that cease and desist, right? I never got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to change the conversation in the ways that I felt I could. I mean, there's plenty of people that are talented that are making the conversation, accelerate. And that was my first way of saying, I want to do it that way. And yeah, Chelsea, with your reach and saying, I'm just going to let the world know this exists, it turned into all kinds of chaos. But it was good. It changed things. So.
And as some background, this was a lovely concept that you did a few years ago. I've lost track of time, but there are a certain number of us that actually still really like cars, and to some degree smaller cars, and would prefer an electric sporty small car.
Yeah.
And so you created this entire concept of the Chevy Jolt with basically like a Bolt drivetrain in a smaller, sportier body, and created a concept. And of course I went, oh my God, this is super cool. And I tweeted about it, and the rest became history to some degree.
Yeah, the rest.
But you had it was like 17 minutes or something of all the magazines picking it up and going, oh my God, this is amazing, he should totally build it. And then eventually people figured out that it was fake, and it was all tribute, and it was all in good sport, and more of like, hey, you guys should consider building these things because there are those of us that like them. So not to tease too much this original thing without explaining it, that was the Chevy Jolt. And I still want one. Dang it, Mark Royce, I still want you to build me one. I will buy it.
Seriously, I'm still in that camp too.
Right?
Oh, and 3 for Russell.
I'll take one, yeah.
Well,
a small, cool EV, yeah, I'm totally done with that.
Yeah, they don't have.
That was your fun way into our conversation, but then you went on to start something much more meaningful, and
Yeah.
much more contributing to the overall deployment of EVs. I mean, I think the Jolt's meaningful, but I get that in the broader sense, Chargeway is more so.
I hope so. Yeah, and I think so too. Because I certainly can't control what the automakers are going to do. I can only tell them as a consumer what I want, and I think other people might agree, which happened. But yeah, with Chargeway, as you know, as Chelsea and I have discussed a lot, it's meant to bring the hard part down to earth for people of what are we actually trying to sell people on. And cars do exist, but they got to use a new fuel type. So how do we make that more approachable? And with all of the engineering and physics that goes on there, Chargeway is meant to just hand it to average people to say, okay, colors for plug types, numbers for power levels, higher numbers, faster charging. And that way you can have a dealer explain it quickly. You can have average people understand it more quickly. And then it really creates, I think, an easier way to dive into owning an EV in a way that's, you can visualize a fuel that's otherwise kind of invisible.
Right. And so the way, an early analogy you used with me was sort of the colors and octane levels on gas pumps, what people are used to seeing. So kind of red, green, blue. And you know that your car needs red versus green versus blue. And yes, there are numbers on there as well. And so for charging, 1 is the level 1 regular 120 outlet we're used to, 2 up through probably 6 or 7 now that you're at. now that everyone's announcing faster speeds. When we started talking, it was like a 5, and now it's it's bigger.
No, that's a cool thing.
So people can quickly hook up with, my car uses red or whatever, and my car can use between 1 and X depending on which car you have, and use the app to find the thing they need. Right?
Yeah, it's really that simple, and it's
by
really,
numbers.
It is. It's not meant to be it's not meant to take away from all the engineering that is there and not honor the people that have developed all these great things.
Of course.
But it's really meant to take their genius and hand it to people that aren't as in tune with engineering as they are. And that's frankly most people. And we're competing against a product called regular. And that's how most people understand getting fuel. So if we're trying to go from regular to something that feels as simple, we can't use engineering terminology and schematic drawings. Dealers won't ever really learn that, and consumers really don't want to feel that that's how they need to drive a car. They need to keep it simple. So I mean, Tesla proved out how you can keep ecosystems closed. So to get other stakeholders to connect and talk together, we need to create a language that's very universal about the new product, which is that fuel that they can all tap into. That's what Chargeway is really designed to be. It'll help automakers and dealers alike. So
yeah, well, and I still meet lots of Tesla drivers and potential like intenders, potential buyers. They're like, wait, but can I still use Chatamo or CCS? Like, can I use the others also? And what's required? So yeah, on one hand, yes, they made it super simple, but there's still lots of questions even for their audience.
Oh, completely. Well, the amount of times I still talk to people that are Tesla owners that will every single day, and we look at the owner groups all the time, whether it's Tesla or other brands and makes, and someone will post a photograph and say, how do I tell the difference between a V2 and a V3 and an urban thing? Like, how do I do that? And oftentimes it's paragraph long responses from people as to how to explain it. And I'll throw up a screenshot of Chargeway and just go, there's a 5, there's a 6, and there's a 7.
Yep.
That's how you do it. And every time it happens, someone goes, wow, that's a lot easier. And so that response is great. I think, every time we talk to people that are outside of our world about what Chargeway is, especially at auto shows and things like that, the average consumer response is always super positive. They always say, this is really easy. This makes a lot of sense. And I can tell that we're bridging that gap between those folks and the people that are like, I want them to learn kilowatts though. And it's like, but they're just not gonna.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not soon or quickly.
Yeah. And that's,
I think there's a point at which in however many years, people may understand kilowatt hours as opposed to gallons of gas. Like it's a similar metric in terms of analogy, but yes, my mother's not going to learn that tomorrow.
Right. Well, yeah. And gallons are a thing. And that's the thing. A lot of our studies, we found people saying, well, a gallon is like a gallon of milk. I get a gallon of milk every weekend at the store. Right. But a kilowatt hour, there's no reference point. They just go, what is that?
Yeah. Right.
And look at the people who still have no idea what mileage they get on that gallon. They know what a gallon is, but what does it get them?
Yeah. Well, and actually, to some degree, my favorite story to this day occurred in the early days of you starting sort of thinking about Chargeway, conceptualizing it. And an actual automaker employee was driving a company car. It was plug-in hybrid. And he texted me over a weekend, and he's like, oh my God, I just went to, it was EVgo, but that part's irrelevant. I went to my first sort of station with multiple chargers and I can't figure out why it didn't fit in my car. How come this fast charger won't work in my car? It was like, well, first of all, that's a product planning decision on your end, because
Right.
that car doesn't do fast charging.
Right.
So take that up with your brethren. Yeah. But also, if the automaker employees that are starting to use these things aren't getting it, and they're more educated than most,
yep.
You know, and yes, we're still in the early adopter phase, and we're nerdier than most, but we're never going to get to mainstream if we don't make all of this easier for everyone.
And one of the studies that really struck me as interesting, the UC Davis study between 2014 and 2017, where they were asking, do you see infrastructure? Do you think there's enough? And then how much infrastructure was out there? And I thought it was very telling that between 2014 and 2017 in California for that study, they doubled the amount of infrastructure between 2014 and 2017, but the amount of people that would respond saying there's not enough also doubled.
Yes.
And I went, whoa, okay, so what that says to me is it's not just if you build it, they will come. There needs to be a way to explain to people what this thing is, which is a new fuel type, and how they can understand how it fits in their life. And that's still not being addressed at all. And
right.
So,
yeah. I mean, in fairness, on one hand, I love that study because it puts data behind a story I've been telling forever, because back in the 90s when we were installing all the charging for GM, we kept hearing from all the drivers, we need more charging, we need more charging. And we kept putting in more charging. And they kept asking, and eventually we figured out they're not used to recognizing chargers as chargers.
Right.
They're looking for things that look like gas stations. And to this day, the chargers are not consistent in their look.
Oh, yeah.
But the lesson that we came out of it with was, yes, to some places more charging is what's required, but everywhere we need more signs.
Yes, 100%.
Because signage is standardized, and that's the visual thing that people can look at and see. And that lesson remains true today as well. But drivers have apps, and that's what you do. We still need signage, especially for the non-drivers. But this notion that there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, but people aren't used to recognizing it for what it is also part of the challenge, and making it more visible in a variety of ways.
Yeah, fuel visibility is, and that's a lot of the utilities we're now working with, that they can leverage what we have as solutions, whether it's the software and the mobile app, or what we have, the Chargeway beacon that goes into showrooms. It creates that visualization. And so, the signage element, to your point, like for non-ED owners, if they see a sign, then they might go, oh, like I didn't realize that was a thing, but I just drove by it on that exit. And that's huge. We had one guy tell us in a focus group, he said, if I'm driving down the highway and I see a gigantic orange orb with a 76 in it,
I know what that is.
Yeah, I know fuel's there. And he said, but how do I visualize that with what you're talking about? And I said, that is exactly what we're trying to solve, step by step and process by process. So again, Chargeway as a solution is meant to be like how we talk about it, but the end game is still we have to be talking about it in the sense that there is a new fuel type out there. And so that's where we've had a lot of fun working with the utilities we're working with to help create that conversation around the country and places. So
the utilities do seem to be your earliest partners. I know Portland General Electric and Austin Energy, they both sing your praises, and there's some partnerships with some local dealers there. So is that the natural partner, or should it be the networks? I mean, I know there were some early conversations there, but I've been a little surprised to not see ChargePoint or EVgo or whoever kind of pick up on the notion. So should this be utility led? Is it meant to be one or the other?
That's a good question. One or the other. I'm not sure if it is kind of black or white in that sense. I think what we found in our conversations with various networks, and we've talked to all of them, is they all acknowledge this is a problem and this is a good idea. But then at the same time, what we've now experienced is that they're all still very much so trying to differentiate themselves to create market share, because at the end of the day, they're a business. And so what we're seeing is that the acknowledgement of we all do sell the same product is understood, but they don't want to admit it that clearly just yet, because then what does differentiate them? And then it is pricing, it is user experience at their particular stations, things of that nature, which can be different depending on how they've set their systems up. But the utility is then standing behind all that saying, well, we can reach thousands of people like that.
Yeah.
And so we can change the conversation quickly. And and what we found is in certain service territories, if the utility says, well, we want to start utilizing Chargeway as a way to explain this, if they have a relationship with any of those networks, whether Green Lots or ChargePoint or what have you, and they say, we want to put infrastructure in with you and use Chargeway, the network just go, well, that's your decision because you're using us as your vendor for hardware. But if you want to label it with Chargeway, have at it. And so that's been the fastest way we've been able to deploy in places and reach people on a wider scale. And I think that's probably the fastest way we can go about doing that throughout the US. So we'll find out more, but we're just still, that's what we've noticed thus far. So.
Okay, but so for those who haven't already heard you on What Drives Us, let's talk about what Chargeway actually is, because we've talked about it conceptually, but what is it? Because I'm leading to the place where no different than red, green, blue on Texaco, but also Chevron and Shell, this is a common language that I see no barrier to multiple networks implementing while still being able to have all their branding. I don't see the issue there. So let's talk about what it actually is.
Yeah. So
go.
Go. So Chargeway by design was to say, okay, we have different plug types and we use different names like J1772, CCS Combo, Chatamo, Tesla. And instead of using schematic drawings alongside what are also considered odd names, we said, let's just identify what we need to talk about, which is a plug type. So we used colors for that. And with that, we then said, well, we still need to talk about power level. And instead of getting into the differences between AC and DC, things of that nature, we said, let's just talk about the fact that if you are at a higher number station, it's going to offer you more power. And let's talk about labeling cars with a number to show how much power it can accept. And so in that sense, you're identifying your vehicle's plug type and power acceptance and a station's plug type and power offering. And so with that, conceptually, it was first to just show everybody from the industry to say, hey, this is an idea how we can make this better for all of us. And what we found a few years ago when we introduced the concept was we had to create turnkey solutions for each stakeholder we talked to. Is they would say, we agree with what you've done, but how do you make it work for us? And so that led to more quickly saying, okay, how do we create solutions like a software platform or things of that nature? Because it's more than just labels on a station, like stickers. We had a lot of people say, so it's just stickers? It's like, no, it's creating user experiences and interfaces in various places, like an auto dealership that can have a large touchscreen that says, we sell you Chevrolet Bolts. This is where the Chevrolet Bolt can charge. It's your visualization of your electric fuel safety net. And so that's what we started looking at, was to say, let's make solutions for dealers. Let's make solutions for drivers where they can have it in their pocket, and then use the exact same software interface so that it's a consistent visualization when they're researching, shopping, and then owning. And then the last element then is with physical charging stations is putting that label on there with the color and number. So it's the tangible breadcrumb that they finally go, oh, wow, that's exactly like my dealer told me. This is really great.
Right. And I've landed the thing at the exact one I saw in my app. I'm sure I'm in the right place.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically creating the very soft approach to explaining what they need to know in a way that's consistent across their journey, so that every stakeholder that's involved, whether it's an automaker, a dealer, a utility, a charging network, they can all say, well, we're explaining this the same way. So if you encounter information from any of those, the consumer can then say, well, this doesn't feel like I have to learn anything. You guys made it pretty turnkey. And so that's really what we look to develop. And so now we're deploying programs with utilities as our first partner. Is they're saying, well, we have outreach and education we need to do. So we've said, okay, well, why don't you utilize Chargeway software in the showroom with the beacon, our kiosk, and you can then have information about what you offer as a local utility in those beacons. And it really then connects the conversation between, I'm a local driver, I bought this electric car, and my local utility is saying, there's this type of incentive for me. My fuel cost at home is this much cheaper than gas. And if they have a home charging program, they can hit a button and have an email sent to them that says, your local utility is offering you this at home to fill up. And it allows for the real easy handoff from the dealership to say, we can explain it, but call our utility and they can button it up for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and you've been in Portland for like a year now, quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Portland pilot,
Austin, last time I was in Austin, I was in Austin in December just as it was launching. So probably less data until then. But are there findings already that you're able to report in terms of numbers, users experience, but also like, is this turning out to actually be easier for dealers to sell? Are you hearing those sorts of things?
The qualitative response we're getting from all the dealers is, we've needed this forever, which is great. But then it's okay, but what is it helping you do? And so with the Portland and the Oregon pilot, we started that in January of 2019. We have a lot of data from that first year. And I think the most telling data point we discovered was that there were 4 Chevrolet dealerships in the Portland metro area. And we had been tracking what their weekly plug-in sales were looking like. We then deployed one Chargeway beacon into one of the dealerships, and alongside the local utility, did some promotions alongside that to kind of expose the idea to the public. And in tracking that over a period of 6 to 9 months and through the entire year, by the end of the year, we found that that dealer was able to move between 2 and 4 times as many plug-in cars per week as the other 3 dealers. And so what it tells us that at a minimum, we know we can create the right touch point for how they can buy the car, provide the dealers the right tools, and then with a little bit, just even a little bit of marketing and exposure, get people to say, oh, that experience was a little bit better. So we have that at least to now jump from, but then that means we have to then start dispersing those more around to more dealers.
Now your real work begins.
Yeah, right. So we have a ton of findings from the rest of the pilot as well. We're gonna present the findings actually at EVS 33, but it obviously didn't happen. So we published it. There's some more information coming out with a lot more robust details about those findings that that will be published soon. So
right.
But that is as a single element. That's one of the things we noticed. And then doing activations at the Portland Auto Show, we found people would walk up and say, so what am I looking at? And they'd see colors and numbers associated with these vehicle boards. And we'd say, oh, colors, plug type, numbers, power level, higher number, faster charge. And then immediately you'd see them going, wow, the Porsche Taycan is a green 7. That's crazy. Wow. Okay. Oh, okay. But okay. The Audi e-tron's a green 6. That's still pretty fast. Okay.
Yeah.
The red? Oh, so Tesla uses a different plug. It's a red 7. Well, that's fast too. Okay. And you can see them clicking. And then you ask, you have any questions? And they go, no, actually, we just kind of want to look at the wall now and shop. And so that was great to see because it made the hard part easy and allowed them to get back to just saying, which brand do I like? What other elements do I like? Is it price? Is it range? Things like that. So that's been really, really great to see. So
I assume these kiosks in the Chevy dealer probably aren't displaying Porsche and Tesla information.
That's correct. They're all brand specific. Yep.
Of course, which isn't a bad thing. That's what you would expect. You wouldn't expect the Chevy dealer to be helping sell Teslas.
Correct. Yep.
When a person has the app on their phone, I assume, will it automatically sort depending on what their vehicle is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, instead of showing you everything first and then saying figure it out, we ask the question of what are you behind the wheel of? What are you driving? And when you enter that, it automatically customizes the map to just that vehicle. And then you can add as many vehicles as you want. So if you're a multi-vehicle family, like my wife and I, for example, we have a Chevrolet Bolt EV and a Tesla Model 3. We can swipe back and forth on the map screen between the two cars, and it dynamically changes the map for that car.
So here's the first tough question, Matt. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
What's the error percentage in that? And I say this because the first time I had an EV here in San Diego, there was like 8 chargers in North San Diego County, and 6 of them were all broken. That's not your fault. That's the charging app that I was using and a charging company which shall remain nameless, which doesn't maintain their chargers. But that's an issue that people have to wrestle with, and I'm just wondering how you've wrestled with that.
Yeah, well, one of the hardest parts, frankly, is kind of the moat that's around each of the networks for their data. Is they share some data, but not all. So a lot of the data we're getting up front is from the alternate fuels database through the DOE. And again, that's all major networks. And so we then take that very basic data and we're able to run it through our software rules engine to create the visualization of Chargeway. So we know it's going to be spot on for plug type and power level. But then the hard part is going to be, is it in use? Is it available? Is it broken? And the best way to get that is with direct API data from each network. And we have started to get those APIs now. Blink, for example, we're going to be adding them, their direct API. So we'll have real time. Again, they're out there though.
So I think your shower name listing just went out the window.
Yeah. I named them. Okay, it was Blink.
Well, and they've got improvements they have to make. And so in the same way, every network
everybody does. Yeah.
It's not just unique to them. So Blink's one of the ones we were going to be adding, and others, again, like OpConnect, smaller ones, but we're talking to the other bigger ones like Greenlots and EVgo, et cetera. But some of them we just flat out won't get. I mean, we know that. And so,
you probably could, but only at a certain price.
Well, that's fair point.
Right.
Yeah. And we're simply not there. So
many things can be paid for. Quite often, I think if you could, because PlugShare was the original app that like all the drivers love and provides a huge amount of information and a lot of input in terms of like what stations are up or down and broken and whatever. What is the opportunity to sort of integrate those sorts of things together. I know they don't have access to all the APIs either, so
Right.
I'm not at all picking on that particular aspect, but I am, every time there's a new layer of like, oh, that's great, this cool, very cool information, I'm like, I just want to shove them all together to make something that works.
Trust me, I hear that. And so we've been doing our best to just respond to people that have been asking for certain features. So over time, we've added the reviews option, so you can add a review on each station to let people know what's going on with it. You can report a problem, things of that nature. We really wanted to focus on curating the data as best we could. We didn't want to just have it be whoever just wanted to enter data could enter, because oftentimes that creates poor information for a crowdsourced station pin. And so we wanted to make sure we were a little bit more accurate with that. But the big thing, we didn't want to replicate what was out there, though. We didn't want to.
No, my question is more, does partnership make sense in some of these cases?
I'm sure it would. I mean, I do believe that. And I'd be more than happy to approach anybody on those conversations, whether it's network or someone else who's making these platforms. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I started using PlugShare when I first started driving EVs too.
Yeah.
But it led me to realizing that I couldn't hand it to friends and family members, because they would go, nope. They'd make assumptions that were wrong, and then they'd go, forget it. And I said, okay, what if I do something to make it easier? And that's essentially what led to the conclusion of what Chargeway needed to be. But Chargeway was never meant to be initially like its own thing of like, I'm going to have to go do this. But I ended up having to, because of
necessity is the mother of invention, or the father, as it may be.
Yes, the parent of invention. So yes. No, I mean, so but I'm more than happy to see how we could streamline this to get it to move faster.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open for those.
I have no dog in the fight. I look at some of these things. I'm like, you do this really well, and you do that really well, and I just want to shove you in a room and make you work together.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right.
You know me to be the matchmaker to some degree, but I also know the egos involved and how not all want to.
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead, Russell. Yeah.
No. I mean, that's the classic business problem, is how to get people to work together, because they're so competitive and they're so confrontational, and they want to protect their little market share, not realizing that maybe if they let go of a little bit of that, everybody would get more.
Well, and I didn't develop Chargeway with the intent of trying to say, I'm going to do it on my own by myself. I really developed it with the intent of saying, here, industry, this is a great solution for all of us. Let's do this. And the only reason it's gotten to where it is now is because I realized that there was no one really that was going to take the mantle and run with creating the actual solutions, something in the showroom, something that could go in a car, something that could go in the pocket. And so we had to develop that out. And so here we are now. And again, I try to be very mindful of not just carpet bombing the world with marketing, saying, look who we are. I'm trying to learn as we go along with this from both, consumers and drivers, utilities, dealers, everybody we talk to. But we've gotten to a place where I think we do have a really strong solution at this point. And I think that if we can start talking about collaborations and making it go faster, I'm game. My entire intent with it was to get more EVs on the road faster and answer questions that consumers that aren't EV drivers today naturally have, which is, well, how do I make it work? And I'm not talking about the car.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us are all for more collaboration. So what's next for, like, is there a next? What needs to happen next? When you got Portland, you got Austin, you're sort of moving forward geographically. Are there other things in the works? Or if folks that are hearing this are going, oh, this is a great idea, I want to be a part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Or I want to encourage it in my area or whatever.
Yeah. I would say, well, number one is predominantly, as you mentioned, like utilities are really where we can work with the most quickly, because they reach a lot of people fast. And because they are, not all, but very much so, a lot of them are getting engaged in the transportation electrification conversation. That's a great starting point. But obviously for drivers that are out there, if you are an EV enthusiast and you want to have your friends and family and everybody that you've never met driving an EV, take Chargeway and see what it can do to provide a better conversation for those moments.
Does the app work nationwide?
Nationwide, yep.
Okay, so as long as it's in the alternative fuels data center, it's in the app.
And well, we're adding content too. So we do.
But I mean, it's not just for Portland and Austin. Like it works well beyond that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, and what's built into it is the things that people want to know, which is when I'm driving this car, which ones work for me. The charge timer built into it is an educational tool so they know what those power levels will do for their charge for their car. And the last element being a trip planner, it's meant to be very seamless in the sense that you can punch in where you want to go. It will tell you which stations to stop at, estimate how long you'll be at each one. And it also, if you tap a button, show you all the stuff along your route. So in case you miss one or one has a problem, you have options. So that's what average people need to know. And the passion of EV owners, I'm one of them. I realized that I would talk people's ears off about the cool stuff that I was like, but you got to learn this. And I realized that average friends of mine would go, I don't want to learn that. But if you can make it easy, then I can hand it to my spouse or maybe my kid who's getting their license and say, trust me, you can't goof this up and it's not going to feel hard. And so so for next steps for us, it's to continue to grow the conversation about how we collectively can make it easier for the other 98% of people. And also in turn, I mean, again, we've got a program in Washington with the Vista Utilities. So we've done some work there. We recently, again, because of COVID, it's hard to see how things are going to play out sometimes, but we activated a program in Indiana as well with IPL. So we have other programs that are in the hopper that are coming along too. Some of them got shelved because of COVID, just
yeah, lots of things are in flux right now.
Right. So we're still looking to create those opportunities in those geographic areas, but we're still talking to a lot of other groups, I mean, such as automakers, in how we can help them translate what their cars are to the public. I think the honest truth is every EV coming out that's a non-Tesla is going to be cross-shopped against a potential Tesla vehicle, whether that's Model Y, Model 3, what have you. And you want to be able to explain to your customer, if you're in another brand, this is how easy charging is. And if you're putting it on them to educate themselves or the dealers to educate themselves, you're going to have a hard time selling that great user experience. So that's what we want to help solve. So
yeah, I mean, I was wondering that as you're describing the Taycan and the Audi and the Tesla, just as an advocate, setting aside, any particular brand favoritism, have you seen any sort of evidence around the notion that like everyone goes, oh my God, the 7s are amazing. And yet we all know as drivers that like 5s are really still pretty good, or 4s. And so are we inadvertently disadvantaging or disincentivizing the non-Porsches, the non-super fast Teslas, the non, like really a Bolt is pretty dang good.
Right.
Fucking good. Or the Leaf, or like the point is not to necessarily, I mean, I feel like I'm constantly fighting this battle of like perfect versus good, and the same thing on plug-in hybrids versus EVs. Like we get to this point as navel-gazing advocates where like, if you don't do the most amazing thing, then don't bother. And so I'm just wondering if you've seen that, any sort of that effect from a consumer perspective. It's not having anything to do with Chargeway per se,
right,
but it's an interesting question.
No, it's a good one. And yeah, what Chargeway does, it creates transparency around that reality.
Right. Well, but the reality is you can have all those things at $100,000 or, depending on the vehicle you're looking at. So yes, we all realize that the more you pay, the more you can get, but are we creating a disproportionate effect?
I think the way, no, I see what you're saying, what you're asking. And the way that we saw, for example, at the Portland Auto Show this year, when people were seeing the differences in the cars, is they kind of said what you said, which is, oh, well, that's a Porsche. I get it. And then say, well, how fast is a 5, like a level 5? And we'd show them on the beacon, hey, if you are almost at empty and you stop at a green 5, for example, you can be back on the road within about 45 minutes. And they would say, actually, that's not that bad. That's like lunch, right? And so that's the concept of helping them, using that identifier, that number as how it meets their need in life. And they might then say, well, yeah, I mean, a 7's great because it might be 15 minutes I'm on the road. But frankly, if I charge at home most of the time, when am I using fast charging? I probably want to stop for lunch on the highway. So that's
at what
part
price?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And so that's part of that education. And so I agree. In fact, we had one person years ago say to us, well, by doing this though, you're making it so that this one charger looks worse than another. And I said, it's not that it's worse than, it's just the transparency around what's a good experience for the customer. And so if someone stops at a green 3 and it takes them 2 hours and 40 minutes to fully charge, but they could have been at a green 5 that took them 50 minutes or less, well, that's a difference. They need to know that. And they can then choose to say, I don't care. I got time. I'm going to go see a movie. A green 3's perfect. I don't care. I mean, that's part of that. And so,
I don't think we're to standardize pricing enough to add the other layers to that.
Right.
A, being most people will charge at home or office or whatever, but also B, comparing a 7 to a 3, but at 3 times the price.
Totally. Yeah.
Still make those decisions, but it's not just a matter of faster is better. It's a matter of trade-off of price and what you're trying to do in that amount of time. And all that.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I think that we've certainly seen is that the fact that we were able to really compartmentalize what those user experiences are and make it more transparent. People definitely appreciate that, and then they'll say, well, I don't even want to see anything less than 3. I just want to see 4 and higher because I live in an apartment and I need that. It's
Right.
like, okay, fine. Then just set the settings on that on Chargeway and you're off to the races. You won't ever find yourself mistakenly at a station that's going to take you too long.
Hmm. Do you-
Well, go ahead, Russell.
no,
And then
no,
I'll ask my last question.
I was just
I
gonna
keep saying
say.
last question, but then I have another one.
I mean, do you think most EV owners? I mean, most EV owners at this point are that savvy, but as the pack expands, as the herd grows, um, that may or may not. My concern is that we simplify things so they're just looking for the fastest thing in their color.
Well, people will naturally, again, that's part of the educational thing that Chelsea was just mentioning, is they might naturally start to do that, but they will learn over time, as a lot of current owners know, is that if you have a place if your car is sitting for 6 hours, you're fine. You don't need to
Right.
go bananas trying to find the high number. You'll learn to understand that, but that is a learning curve because it's a completely different understanding of how to fill up compared to what they've known forever, which is speed and convenience. And
Right.
so knowing how to differentiate those moments for your own life is part of the educational process. And so I don't foresee that it's only going to lead to people wanting fast. I think that as early adopters have proven, once you do understand it, you don't find yourself being concerned with having to find fast, especially if you have an option for something that just you plug it in and it sits and you're good. But that also then gets back to where are we putting those options and how do we make it easy to understand what that option is, which is, again, part of what Chargeway is trying to do.
So my actual last question before we let you go. If one were to try to integrate things like pricing and stuff to help, I mean, I guess I'm asking a very open-ended question around, were you to give advice for regulators or other charging networks, whomever, to make this extra information easier for you to integrate? Because I'm thinking about the fight a little bit around, like, California is starting to integrate, thankfully, because most drivers have been asking for it, per kilowatt hour pricing versus per session or per minute and all these other things. It's really hard today for any driver to translate all the different fees that all the different networks are charging and compare them.
Yeah.
Is regulating a certain metric important, or is there a translation you can use, or how else could some of the other policies or decisions be helpful to the customer education that you're trying to do, if you wanted to add extra information?
Yeah, I think the California step is important, namely because the charging by time is terrible.
As drivers, I think we individually agree, but I'm also asking just from a pure metric standpoint.
Yeah, no, I think that, and the way to translate that and how it can be translated, if you're talking about, purely by kilowatts and kilowatt hours, is basically how we've captured that is we know all the background data for each car and for what each station is offering. And so if we can then translate that into what they want to know most, which is cost and time, then simply if there's a cost associated with that kilowatt hour, we know we can then associate that with the time compared to what the battery pack is doing and what they might want. So then they can say, all right, and that's basically what the Chargeway timer does by design, but we just then need to associate that directly with cost. And so if we have the right, if it's all normalized, standardized, if we have the right price per kilowatt hour listed for each network, we can then just take that data and put it into what we're already estimating for charge time and then extrapolate out from that a price. So we do have some of that data is offered through the AFDC, but not all. Good examples, networks like ChargePoint will oftentimes let the station owner set their price, and sometimes that data is not available. And so that's where, from a policy perspective, I think what's happening in California is the right first step, in the sense that it adds a level of clarity for what we can then create into an honest answer, which is, this is the amount of time based on the vehicle and the station, and we know based on price per kilowatt hour, we can assess this is probably your price. And so then how it's visualized, that's the other hard part, because marquees that say regular $3.50 a gallon are all over creation. And right now you have to dig in to find what is that, fast charging or non-fast charging price away from home. And sometimes it can be pricey if you don't have the right info, and you might not want to choose that station. So,
or you do, because you're on the annual road trip, so it's not necessarily disadvantaged. But I'm thinking about in the app where, I'm looking at a red 4 or whatever, and I can click on it and go, that's how much it's going to cost me. And then know as I plan it what I'm doing. Yeah,
so in some of the station pins, we do have that data built in. So for example, for Electrify America, we've identified if you're a level 3 through 5 vehicle, it's this much, for a minute, for example. So we do have some of that. We can then start to take that and build it into a trip planner. And then that could be very easily, as a line item of it's this much time, excuse me, but then it's this much cost. But then for an individual station, it's totally doable. You just then need to know how you're trying to explain what the person wants to know. If they just want to find info on the station, then it gets down to, if they know how much it is per kilowatt hour, but they don't know what that means for their needs, they then need to be able to hit the timer and go, I have this much range left. Okay, cool. That's $14.
Right.
Yeah, that we could integrate with the right data, and in some places we got it, in some places we don't from certain networks. So
That's the problem with a million different people doing sort of a similar thing competitively. I mean,
yeah.
Well, and just also this being a new space, and so we're all constantly doing the math on. We all want, like as nerds, I want to know all the things, but what's truly important? What's the right time? Time, effort, monetized investment versus return to convey these. Like not everyone wants to know what I want to know. I accept that sort of.
Well, one of the cool things
I think about all the questions I get all the time, and all the new EV drivers I know who are like, okay, now I understand which stations I can use, but is it worth using the station? I mean, the number of local drivers that still show up to local fast charging sites with a 75% charge, like they don't really need the charge, and therefore they're not understanding how to do the math or evaluate the value of
or they're just
for
OCD.
the price they're about to be charged.
Yeah, well, they're OCD. Well, one of the things we built into the beacon is basically a meter where you have the price of the kilowatt hour at home from your utility, and then we have the local fuel cost, average local fuel cost per gallon, also associated. And you can change it to just be like, and you can say how many miles a week do you drive, for example, or a day, and you can basically just move the meter, and they can visualize immediately, like, wow, if I drive 300 miles in a week, for example, that's how much my bill is going to change on my utility bill, but I would have spent that much more in gasoline. Whoa.
Right.
So it's a good comparison tool for what might happen at home. But to your point, the various networks you might find yourself at, that's the more complex element that we certainly want to solve that for people for transparency. So one more thing to work on.
I like giving out homework.
Yeah, that's fine.
You like doing homework?
I like giving out homework.
Oh, giving out homework.
Actually, I don't mind doing it either, but I might be known to give out a little here and there.
Nice.
It's like I feel like I'm just still constantly thinking and working on this all the time anyway. So for me, I'm just like, oh, cool, one more thing. Yay.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I haven't mentioned anything you haven't already thought of or are working on. So.
Well, prioritizing it matters too, because some things that I think that that I might be saying actually it'd be great to work on. If someone's from the outside can say, well, actually, in all the conversations we had as of late or information we saw from said survey, that might be important for what you're working on, but you really might want to reprioritize this element because it actually is proving out to be a much more important element for people that aren't EV owners today. So
I'm thinking entirely of like the before and just early folks trying to sort things out. It's not like you got one now you're over the hump. There's still that early learning curve.
even today, before we got onto our treehouse meeting, there was in one owner's group some guy posted a question. He goes, how do I tell if my Bolt has fast charging? And then immediately all these people saying, flip open the door, show us a photo, we'll tell you. But then the immediate gripe of, how is this getting past the showroom? How did you not know? And that's where I'm sitting there going, this is a big part of that conversation too, is don't get into the car without knowing all the things you need to know.
Well, and dealers are a whole nother, this is sort of infrastructure week, so I didn't get too far into the dealers, but there's many layers on dealers we could do.
It also highlights how many new owners, just charge at home.
Oh, totally.
And it's rare that they're using a charger that isn't in their house.
I mean, my wife and I charge at home exclusively, essentially. But we did a few day trips a few weeks ago, and we fast charged away from home, but that had been the first time we'd fast charged easily in 6 months. And that's the catch, right? It's like 50 to 60% of the US, for the most part, is going to fill up at home almost exclusively. But when they do leave home, one of the best comments we heard from a focus group we held is someone said, I love the idea of filling up home. I think that's cool. And it's cool that it's cheaper, but I've never owned a car that was tethered to my house.
Right.
I knew I could take it wherever I wanted to go and trust it. And that's the next step you have to show me. So that's still part of the underlying confidence element of I'll buy an EV and I might fill it up at home almost all the time, but I got to still know if I want to leave home, I can just still trust it. So.
Well, and increasingly, I think a lot about the degree to which fast charging is being basically promoted as the solution to multi-unit, multi-family dwellings.
Yeah.
And so like, oh yeah, if you live in an apartment, go get an EV and just rely all the time on one of the fast chargers in town. And yet, given the pricing of those, they tend to not be really affordable for full-time use.
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect as well. Like, okay, fine, if you're one of those people that's considering it, you're lucky if you have lots of options, but you still need to be able to evaluate the pricing between them. But certainly before you make that choice, you should be aware of what those fueling costs will be.
Oh yeah, totally. No, and that too, how that also, kind of bookends the other element of cost you were talking about. No, it really emphasizes that level of transparency that needs to be there. And I can certainly spend more time digging into that, because obviously if it's a great talking point for someone like you that's talking to thousands of people on a regular basis, and what you're saying to them is they hear it and they go, well, she knows what she's talking about. So if it's pointed out as a problem, and it's also something that needs a solution, the faster I can help.
I'm pointing it out as a problem.
Well, and then it's my job.
I'm looking straight into camera. It's a problem. It's not up to Matt to solve.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Right. It's not just your deal.
You're one of the many people I'm looking at, but I'm just so others need to chime in with solutions, but also, I think some standardization around how some of these things are conveyed and talked about could be helpful at a minimum.
Yeah, and that's all I'm trying to do. So anybody I can talk to that'll help make that something we do faster. I will be their biggest cheerleader, because that's all I want to do is make this easier for all of us. So
yep.
So
sure.
Matthew, your customers come in a few flavors, and as we wrap up, I just want to. So if you're an EV owner, or you want to be an EV owner, you want to download the Chargeway app. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's available for both platforms, both major platforms.
iOS and Android, yep, free.
Okay. They can do that for free. Mm-hmm. Sign up, and they can take advantage of all this information, all this transparency.
Yeah.
Car dealers should contact you.
Yeah, definitely. If they want to know how to explain, they know how to sell cars really well, and consumers understand cars. They don't know how to explain the product they don't make, which is a new fuel type. We answer that question for them, and we make their cars all the more attractive because we answer the fuel question in a way that is easy for them to explain and sell. So
if you're a car dealer selling EVs, you might want to have a beacon in your dealership, right? And you should talk to Matt about that.
That'd be great.
And I get 10%.
and then from there, it's the utilities.
It's the utilities.
Yeah. So they are the utilities, in our view. Again, each individual dealer, they're selling their brand, and they need to be able to create better ways of explaining how their electric cars work. And that's individualized. From the utility perspective, we see that they are the maker of the new fuel. So we can work with them to really distribute information faster to more places potentially, and even support the dealers in that sense as well, which is part of how we've started. But the dealers have every option to just come to us and say, we know we need something like this. And then going up another level is talking to the automakers themselves that do support dealers with solutions to help move more metal. And so in talking to the automakers as well, that's a big next step too, is to say, you can also take advantage of this. And you can either work with your dealers on how they can take advantage of these solutions, or you can even yourself utilize our solutions to have them integrated into the vehicle. So when they arrive at the showroom, it's built in. So these are all steps and conversations that we have on a regular basis. So for all those touch points, those are people we want to talk to and support.
And where would they find you?
Chargeway.net. And on social media, it's Chargeway on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. It's just all Chargeway. And we're always open to talking to owners and drivers, but also the people that are just doing research and asking questions. And we talk to each of those types of people every single day. And so I think a big, part for what we're working on too is the owners that are passionate, that have, for the last 20 more years have made what the industry is today, what it is. The request I have is to say, help us help you. Is you want to get EVs to be far more adopted, and faster, and get everybody as passionate as you are, but maybe leaning into that conversation, it could be a little bit more approachable. And that's that's all I'm looking to do is help that happen.
There you go. Chelsea, my captain. Anything else?
All the thanks to Matt for joining us.
Absolutely.
And chatting and catching up, and we'll yank you back in for the next round of pestering, but give you a bit of a break for now.
I'm always game. That's fun.
Maybe we'll invite you politely. We may not yank. I don't know.
Well, either
Chelsea
way.
might. She's the demonstrative one.
Let's
No,
not go there.
let's not go there. That's fine.
That all sounds wrong. So.
Yeah, it did. It went south really quick. My apologies. So thanks again to Matt Teske, the founder and creator, the genius behind Chargeway. You can find them at chargeway.net. Again, Chargeway on social media, and of course, download the app on your mobile device if you have an electric vehicle and check it out. And then be sure to tell Matthew what you think of it, or tell us, because we're cool with that too. Anyway, thanks very much. Tune in soon for our next episode of Transport Treehouse.